By their standards, Mercedes had a pretty quiet test, fairly anonymous actually. And a lot of people think that they're sandbagging. I'm not so sure, but because there's so many people that think they are, I thought we'd look at the facts. First of all, we know that Mercedes have a substantially different car this year than last year. They've changed their entire concept, and obviously visually that means side pods. That's the biggest thing people are going to focus on. But there's a lot of changes to this car. The floor has changed, the rear diffuser has changed, the gearbox has shrunk down, the front suspension has been altered, the rear suspension has changed to pushrod. All of this combined makes a very different platform for Mercedes with the W15. Visually, I think the car looked good out on track. The very first day I wasn't too sure about it. It still looked a little bit rear happy, but at that point they're still, testing different things. It's straight out the box. They're probably working through a few different things on the setup and the rear of the car, but it did get dialed in a bit more in day 2 and day 3. The long run pace of the Mercedes looked promising. It looked good. Interestingly, a lot of people in the paddock have Mercedes down in their estimations. Red Bull, Ferrari, Aston, McLaren, and then Mercedes is where a lot of people stack the front teams up. Now, what I saw of the Mercedes, it looked solid on track. But is it quick? It's hard to know. Mercedes as the 5th best team? I don't think they are. They did have some really interesting developments on show as well throughout the test, including the most obvious, the very clever front wing. The front wing was the talk of the paddock, really, next to the Red Bull. And it's nice to still see Mercedes pushing the envelope and doing interesting things that are just on that line of allowable and legal. The rules dictate that all of the front wing elements, so all of the front wing flaps, must go from the end plate and attach to the nose. What Mercedes have managed to do is run a very small piece of carbon along the halfway from where the flap really ends to the nose, and that is allowing the wing to be legal. Supposedly the FIA have deemed it legal. This is allowing them to create an aerodynamic vortex, essentially, that aids the movement of the air around the wheels and potentially reduce drag. Now, you may notice that Mercedes have worked this area quite a lot. They were the first team to introduce a very interesting way of attaching the flaps to the end plate. So this is something that they've obviously been working on for a long time, and it's an area they think they can develop. Maybe teams will challenge it, but they're very happy that it's legal. The FIA have said it's legal, but it's against maybe the spirit of the regulations. As far as I'm concerned, there is no spirit of the regulations. There's legal, there's illegal, and the engineer's job is to push those boundaries and those lines. The other interesting thing was noticed on the Mercedes was a changeable front suspension arm. The overall design was changed for this season, and during the test it was noticed that the suspension arm, the front suspension arm on the Mercedes, changed to a much steeper angle. And it turns out Mercedes have this panel on the front that allows them to drastically change the angle of the suspension arm. This gives them either more or less anti-dive. It's a suspension solution that essentially aids the front of the car from diving down too much under braking. Now, most suspension on all the teams will have a bit of variance that allows the teams, to change it. But this was almost modular design that you could really switch from two very different extremes. It seems like it's a lengthy thing to change, and they tried 2 different options during testing to get data on which one they will use. They may decide to play around with it per race weekend, or maybe they're just testing it to see which one they will use across the whole season. But it does look like there is an option there where per race weekend they could change that. So, how are they sandbagging? Well, first of all, let's go on to what the drivers are saying. Both drivers seemed very happy, if not playing down the expectations. George Russell said, "Overall, the W15 does feel nicer to drive than last year's car. We know that it's not about the feeling, but the speed. Nevertheless, today was about learning and not about chasing performance." Then Lewis also had positive things to say. "It's much more enjoyable to drive. We still also have time to find, but I think Red Bull clearly are out in the distance. But it's a good platform to work from this year." Both drivers over the course of the weekend went on to say about how the bad features of the W14, the previous car, were gone, and that spiteful rear end, as James Allison called it, that didn't give the drivers any confidence. They said that they can lean on this car a lot more and they can push it through the medium and high-speed corners, which they couldn't do last year. The fact that Lewis said it was enjoyable to drive, using the words enjoyable, is actually quite a big thing. That being said, they were playing down the chances, and everyone, including Mercedes, believes Red Bull are ahead. It was James Allison, though, speaking to Sky that grabbed my attention. Listen to this.
Well, I think we've had a better day today. We definitely found a better way forward with it today, and we're reasonably pleased with the pace it was showing at the end of today. When we were all running together, there was a McLaren and a Ferrari going around the track at the same time on the same tyres. We were looking all right.
It was the smile that Allison had on his face. He looked genuinely happy, and he is a pretty upbeat guy anyway, so maybe we shouldn't read too much into that. But the way he was speaking seems to suggest that their race pace was very comparable to Ferrari and McLaren. Now, everyone seems to believe that Ferrari are the next best team. Everyone's excluding Mercedes from that, but it feels like from Mercedes' point of view, or at least James Allison, he feels from the data that he has that they're up there with them. There is rumblings that Mercedes' race pace might actually be better than Ferrari's, but their one lap might be just a little bit worse. All the positive vibes don't mean that they're sandbagging, though. I do, however, think they made a leap forward, but the truth is that Ferrari, Aston, McLaren, and especially Red Bull have also made a jump. The real question is, who's jumped the furthest? I think it's likely Red Bull. There is one other data point as well, and that is the top speed of the teams. Ferrari had the quickest time registered down the straight during long runs, but Mercedes was also the slowest, 12 kilometers down on Ferrari. It's been said, and again, this is conjecture, it can't be confirmed, that Ferrari on their long runs were upping their engine. And that was just so they can get a real understanding of where they are on the tyre wear, something they struggled with last year. On the medium runs and the lower fuel runs, if they did any, we don't really know. The engine was turned down, but the engine was perhaps turned up a little bit more so they could get some real data on their tyre wear. We don't know if that's true. But when it comes to Mercedes top line speed, this could mean two things. One, their car is simply draggy, and we know that was a problem last year, a big problem that they had, mainly due to their side pod design they believed. I don't think that is the answer though, because they've spent a good amount of time, according to James Allison, reducing the car's drag, getting more out of the engine. It's more likely that they were running their engine mode conservatively and perhaps maybe running the car with a lot of fuel. Red Bull was the second slowest car on the straight, so that should tell you everything you need to know about them. They were definitely running their car on a lower engine mode, which means there is more to come from them. That's worrying. I don't think Mercedes are purposely holding back speed, but I don't think they've shown their hand either. I don't think they're going to be ahead of Red Bull, but I don't think they're going to be the fifth fastest team either, like a lot of people are anticipating. Their race pace seems strong. The car seems a lot better from the driver's perspective. They're able to push, they're able to lean on it. It's far more drivable. Maybe they're lacking a little bit over one lap, but they've got a little bit of time now for Bahrain and of course at the beginning part of the season to work on that. Their qualifying may be a struggle early on, but I think their race pace will be strong. I'm hoping for a very close fight with Ferrari come Friday in qualifying, and of course Saturday with the race. I think Red Bull are out in front though, and I think they will be too far away, but we'll wait and see. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.